Hello, and my name is Olivia Drew Moyd. We are going to be talking about ethics in research today for American College of Education with Dr. Wendy Cotti, Research 6003. What is ethics in research? Ethics in research looks at right versus wrong. It looks at acceptable and unacceptable behavior. It looks at the norms that help to distinguish ethics. It also can look at ethics and law. So just because something is ethical does not make it lawful, and just because something is lawful does not necessarily make it ethical. We do have to adhere to some ethical norms in research, and this is so we can promote knowledge, we can promote truth, and avoid falsifying information or error. We also have to look at cooperation and coordination with other colleagues so that we can promote trust and accountability. We can have mutual respect with our colleagues and make sure that everyone is receiving credit for their work. Researchers also have to be held accountable by the public so that we are ensuring that we are maintaining the safety of our subjects as well as protecting their information. When we build public support, that means that we are building our trust within other companies. It helps to promote funding. It also helps to promote integrity of the research. And finally, we want to promote moral and social values such as human rights and animal welfare so that we can make sure that everybody is in accordance with those ethical norms. Some basic ethical principles that were stated by the Belmont Report include respect for people, beneficence, and justice. When we talk about respect for people, we are acknowledging autonomy and we are protecting people that do not have as much autonomy. And what that means is that we are making sure that somebody who has autonomy has information available to them so that they can make decisions based on what they're told. Someone who may have a diminished autonomy may have a mental disability or may not have the ability to make their own decisions and therefore need a legal guardian to help make those decisions with them. Beneficence means that we are not harming our subject. We also want to make sure we maximize our benefit and minimize our harm with our research. And then justice is looking at our distribution of burdens and benefits. We don't want one group to get all the burden and one group to get all the benefits. So we look at how can this be distributed evenly based on equal share, individual need, effort, contribution, and merit. Some other ethical principles that we can look at that go a little beyond what the Belmont Report was talking about. We can look at some honesty. So we want to make sure that we are very honest with our colleagues, with the public, with our communications. We want to remain objective. So all the bias that can sometimes be in research, we want to try to leave that out as much as possible. We want to show integrity, which means that we are maintaining consistency throughout our actions. We also want to be careful not to have any errors or neglect anything at all times. Openness goes right along with that honesty. We're sharing our information. Transparency means that we are disclosing any information that we are needing to disclose so that our research can be evaluated by others. Accountability, so be responsible for your actions. Intellectual property, this is looking at plagiarism. So don't say that you did something when you didn't do it. Confidentiality is going to protect all information, whether it be your personal information or the personal information of others. Make sure that we have to be respectful and responsible, not only with our publications, of our mentors, of our colleagues, of ourselves. We want to make sure that we are being socially responsible. We don't discriminate against our subjects or our colleagues. We maintain our competence. We follow all the laws, and we protect our animal subjects or human subjects depending on what the research is talking about. When we talk about using human subjects, we have to look at the application of those human subjects. So what is it that a human subject really needs to have? They need to make sure they have informed consent. What that means is that you have disclosed all information about your research to that person that isn't going to impede the integrity of the research. So the person that's going to be involved needs to know what's happening before, during, and after the research. Are they doing some kind of medication study where they're going to be taking medications or trials of vaccinations, things like that? We also have to make sure that they understand what's happening with their information. So, is their information going to be utilized? Is it going to be disclosed to other research? Is it going to be shared? So, what's going to happen to their personal information? And the person also needs to be a volunteer participant. We're not wanting to persuade anybody to participate and then have that person have regrets later. We also must look at benefit versus risk assessment. So our benefits should always outweigh our risk. If the risks are going to outweigh the benefits, then the research can't be done. The benefits and risk assessment is going to help justify the research that you're doing. And then when we are selecting our subjects, we have to look at what is our criteria, try to take a random sample from that criteria, and we want to be as fair and unbiased as possible. So we want to get a good mix of a population. So in the picture that I've shown, you've got your population, and you can see that the treatment versus the control group, they have a fairly even distribution getting their medications or whatever have you that they're doing with the research. Accountability. We are held accountable by a lot of different people when doing research. One of those sets of people might be the person that's funding the research. They're going to have some bias towards what outcome they want, but they're also going to keep the researcher accountable for making sure that they're disclosing accurate information. So we don't want to make up information. We don't want to falsify information, and we definitely don't want to plagiarize information. Accountability is also going to be allowing us to provide some of the raw data or means for analyzing the data so that it can be verified, say, by another researcher, or if someone is doing a different type of research project but using similar data, they may want to be able to add that to their data. When looking at reliability and validity, these are very similar terms and sometimes can be misconstrued and used interchangeably. However, they should not be used interchangeably. Reliability is going to imply consistency and stability. So there's three attributes. We've got equivalence, stability, and then homogeneity, which is internal consistency. Reliability, in a sense, is how precise is your research. Whereas validity looks at more of the word accuracy. Is it measuring what it's supposed to measure, or is it measuring what an expected outcome is supposed to be? So we can have a couple of different ways to look at this. You can look at the research instrument, and does it have homogeneity, convergence, and theory evidence? Or you can look at the criterion validity as convergent, divergent, or predictive validity. Now, the picture that is showed is showing you how these two terms are not necessarily one and the same. So in the first picture, it's showing you reliability with validity. So if you're trying to aim for the bullseye, the validity is hitting the bullseye. Reliability is hitting the bullseye every time. Whereas if you're reliable but not valid, which is the far right picture, you can see you've got all of those little dots in one little clustered area. So your data is very reliable. You got similar results every single time. However, it was not valid because your results should have been closer to that bullseye. Now, valid but not reliable, you hit the target each time, but you kind of hit it all over the place. So that's where you're looking at you're valid but not reliable, because in order to be reliable, you have to kind of cluster your data points a little bit better. Credibility and believability fall right along lines with your validity and reliability. Credibility is looking at your evidence that supports your idea. So your credibility needs to come from peer-reviewed sources. It needs to come from data that has been tested numerous times. looking at a review of literature to see, okay, where did other researchers go? What information did they collect? And then believability is looking at how are the variables linked? Is the research credible? And how well does it convince the reader that the ideas are true? So low believability is looking at you didn't really do a good job of convincing your reader that your research is enhancing your relationship within your variables. High believability means that you have a significant support of research and you're convincing the reader that this research is definitely true and it supports your hypothesis, and it can just convinces the reader that the information is definitely believable. The reason that this is so important is so that if you're trying to become a published researcher, you're more likely to get published because you're going to have more people believing that your information is true. You're also going to be seen as a credible writer and therefore a credible researcher. And this is a group of references that I used throughout this presentation. Thanks for listening.